Jasmine Wright stood in the wings of the Chicago Grand Theater, her fingers trembling as she clutched a faded photograph of her mother. In 30 minutes, she would walk onto that legendary stage. But this wasn't about fame. This wasn't about recognition or applause. This was about survival. This was about saving the only person who had ever truly loved her. Her mother, Gloria Wright, lay in a hospital bed across town, her weakening heart counting down its final beats. The doctors had been clear without surgery, she had maybe 6 weeks. With surgery, she could live for decades. The problem? The surgery cost $85,000. Money they didn't have. Money they'd never had. The Chicago Grand Theater Talent Competition offered a first-place prize of $100,000. It was Jasmine's only chance, her last chance, and in just 30 minutes, everything would be decided. She looked down at the photograph in her hands. Her mother's smile, captured on a rare good day, stared back at her. Behind that smile, Jasmine knew, was 14 years of struggle. 14 years of working double shifts. 14 years of sacrifice. All because one man had walked away. Jasmine's father had left when she was 3 years old. She barely remembered him, just fragments. A deep voice, large hands guiding her small fingers across piano keys, the smell of cologne. And then one morning, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. But Jasmine couldn't think about that now. She couldn't think about the past. She could only think about the present, about the future she was fighting for. She folded the photograph carefully and slipped it into her pocket right over her heart. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of the audience settling into their seats. 2,000 people. 2,000 strangers who would judge whether her mother lived or died. The thought made her stomach turn, made her hands shake even harder. But Jasmine had no idea that sitting in the judges' panel reviewing contestant forms with a gold pen was the man who had abandoned her all those years ago. She had no idea that the head judge of this competition, the legendary pianist and producer Darius Cole, was about to have his entire world shattered. And she had no idea that in less than an hour, everything she thought she knew about her past would change forever. To understand how Jasmine Wright ended up backstage at the Chicago Grand Theater, desperately competing for her mother's life, you need to understand where she came from. You need to understand the South Side of Chicago, where hope goes to die, and dreams are luxuries nobody can afford. Jasmine and her mother lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago. The heating barely worked in winter. The air conditioning didn't work at all in summer. But it was home. It was all they had. Gloria Wright worked 2 jobs to keep that home. During the day, she cleaned office buildings downtown, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans for people who never looked her in the eye. At night, she waited tables at a diner on the corner, serving coffee and pancakes to truck drivers and insomniacs. She came home exhausted, her feet aching, her back screaming. But she never complained. Not once. Jasmine tried to help however she could. She got a job at 16, working weekends at a grocery store, bagging purchases and collecting carts from the parking lot. Every dollar she earned went straight to her mother. Every single one. They were a team. They were all each other had. Music was Jasmine's escape. When she was 7 years old, she found an old electronic keyboard in a dumpster behind their building. Someone had thrown it away. Half the keys didn't work. The speaker crackled. But to Jasmine, it was treasure. She taught herself to play. She watched free videos online at the public library. She practiced on that broken keyboard for hours every day, her fingers flying across the working keys, her mind filling in the sounds of the broken ones. She was a natural. Music made sense to her in a way that nothing else did. When she played, the apartment didn't feel so small. The world didn't feel so heavy. Her mother would come home from her shift and find Jasmine at that keyboard, lost in melody. Gloria would stand in the doorway, tears in her eyes, listening, because Jasmine played exactly the way her father had played. That same intensity, that same passion, that same gift. But Gloria never told Jasmine about her father. What was there to say? That he'd been a struggling musician who got scared when she got pregnant, that he'd chosen his career over his family, that he'd left them with nothing but a few faded photographs and a lifetime of questions? No. Some truths were too painful to speak out loud. Life continued in its harsh rhythm. Jasmine excelled in school despite everything. She dreamed of studying music at a real conservatory, of playing in concert halls, of making her mother proud. But college was impossible. They could barely afford rent. Dreams like that were for other people, for people born into different circumstances. And then 3 months ago, everything changed. Jasmine came home from school and found her mother collapsed on the kitchen floor. For a moment, time stopped. For a moment, Jasmine couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. Then instinct kicked in. She called 911. She held her mother's hand. She prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. At the hospital, the doctors explained that Gloria's heart was failing. Years of stress, of overwork, of poverty had taken their toll. She had a damaged valve that needed to be replaced immediately. The surgery was complex but routine. The survival rate was excellent. But without insurance, without money, the hospital couldn't help them. They gave Gloria medication to manage the symptoms and sent her home with a bill they'd never be able to pay. 6 weeks, the doctor said. Maybe 8, if she was lucky. After that, her heart would give out completely. Jasmine spent that night sitting beside her mother's bed, watching her sleep, listening to each labored breath. She couldn't lose her mother. She wouldn't. There had to be a way. There had to be something she could do. The next morning, walking to school in a daze, Jasmine saw a poster stapled to a telephone pole. The Chicago Grand Theater Talent Competition, open to all ages, all talents. First prize, $100,000 and a recording contract. Auditions in 3 weeks. Jasmine stopped walking. She stared at that poster for a long time. $100,000. More than enough for the surgery. More than enough to save her mother's life. But there was a registration fee. $200. $200 they didn't have. $200 that might as well have been $2 million. Jasmine went to school that day, but she didn't hear a single word her teachers said. Her mind was racing, calculating, planning. She could pick up extra shifts at the grocery store. She could sell her phone, her laptop, everything she owned. She could make this work. She had to make this work. During lunch, she went to the music room. Her music teacher, Ms. Anderson, was grading papers at her desk. Ms. Anderson had always believed in Jasmine. She'd fought to get her into the school's music program, even though Jasmine couldn't afford an instrument. She'd stayed late countless times to give her free lessons. She'd seen Jasmine's potential when everyone else saw just another poor kid from the South Side. Jasmine told her everything. About her mother. About the surgery. About the competition. About the registration fee she couldn't afford. She tried to stay composed, tried to keep her voice steady, but by the end, she was crying. She was so tired of being strong. So tired of pretending everything was okay. Ms. Anderson didn't hesitate. She opened her purse and pulled out her credit card. She registered Jasmine for the competition right there, right then. When Jasmine tried to refuse, tried to say she couldn't accept charity, Ms. Anderson stopped her. "This isn't charity," she said firmly. "This is an investment. I'm investing in your talent. And when you win, when you save your mother, you can pay me back. But right now, you let me do this. You let someone help you for once." Jasmine hugged her teacher and cried harder. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. For the next 3 weeks, Jasmine practiced every spare moment. She chose her piece carefully, Clair de Lune, by Claude Debussy. It was one of the most beautiful, most emotional piano compositions ever written. And it was the piece that lived in the oldest, haziest corner of her memory. She didn't know why, but something about that melody felt familiar, like a lullaby she'd heard in a dream. Her mother, despite growing weaker every day, insisted on hearing her practice. She would sit in the doorway of Jasmine's room, wrapped in a blanket, smiling through her pain. And sometimes, when Jasmine hit a particularly beautiful phrase, Gloria would close her eyes and tears would slip down her cheeks. "You sound just like him," she whispered once. Jasmine stopped playing. "Like who?" But Gloria just shook her head. "Keep playing, baby. Don't stop." The night before the competition, Jasmine couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind running through the piece over and over. Her fingers twitched against the mattress, playing invisible keys. Everything came down to tomorrow. Everything. Her mother appeared in the doorway. She looked so frail, so tired, but her eyes were bright. "Come here," Gloria said softly. Jasmine went to her mother's room and climbed into bed beside her, just like she used to do when she was little and had nightmares. Gloria stroked her hair, humming softly. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Gloria said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. You're stronger than I ever was, braver, and so talented." "Don't talk like that," Jasmine whispered. "You're going to be fine. I'm going to win and you're going to get your surgery and everything is going to be okay." Gloria smiled. "I believe in you, baby. I always have." They fell asleep like that mother and daughter, holding on to each other in the darkness. And in the morning, Jasmine woke up and prepared to fight for both their lives. The Chicago Grand Theater was even more magnificent than Jasmine had imagined. The building was over 100 years old, a monument to a time when theaters were palaces and art was sacred. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Velvet curtains the color of deep wine framed the massive stage. Gold leaf decorated every surface, glinting in the spotlight. Jasmine had never felt more out of place in her entire life. She'd worn her best outfit, which was really just her only decent outfit, black pants she'd bought at a thrift store, and a simple white blouse her mother had ironed carefully that morning. Compared to the other contestants, she looked like she'd wandered in from the street. The backstage area was chaos. 50 contestants, all preparing for their moment in the spotlight. There were singers warming up their voices, dancers stretching in corners, instrumentalists tuning their instruments. Everyone looked confident. Everyone looked like they belonged. Jasmine found a quiet corner and tried to calm her racing heart. She'd brought her old keyboard, the one from the dumpster. She'd cleaned it as best she could, replaced the batteries, tested every working key. It wasn't much, but it was hers. It was the instrument that had taught her everything she knew. "Oh my God," a voice said behind her. "Is that your keyboard?" Jasmine turned. A girl about her age stood there, looking at the old keyboard with barely concealed amusement. She was white blonde, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Jasmine's rent. Everything about her screamed money, from her perfect makeup to her designer shoes. "Yes," Jasmine said quietly. "It is." The girl laughed. "That's so vintage. Are you going for some kind of ironic aesthetic?" "No," Jasmine said. "I'm going for the only keyboard I have." The girl's smile faltered slightly, but only slightly. "Well, good luck with that. I'm Blair Huntington, by the way. I'll be performing a vocal-piano combination piece. Original composition. I've been training with private tutors since I was 4. She gestured to the expensive digital piano being wheeled in by a professional crew. "That's mine. It's the same model they use at Carnegie Hall." Jasmine didn't know what to say. She just nodded. Blair looked her up and down, her expression somewhere between pity and contempt. "You know, some people just aren't cut out for this kind of competition. There's no shame in admitting you're outmatched." Before Jasmine could respond, a production assistant called for contestants to gather. Blair walked away without another word, her designer heels clicking against the floor. Jasmine stood there, gripping her keyboard, feeling smaller than she'd ever felt. Maybe Blair was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe this whole thing was a stupid, desperate fantasy. But then she thought of her mother lying in a hospital bed, her heart beating weakly, counting down its final days. And she thought of that photograph in her pocket. And she thought of all those nights practicing on that broken keyboard, teaching herself because no one else would. No. She did belong here. Maybe not in the way Blair belonged, with her money and her private tutors and her Carnegie Hall piano. But she belonged in a different way, in a way that mattered more. She belonged because she needed to be here, because her mother's life depended on it, because she had something to prove, if only to herself. A voice boomed through the backstage speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, contestants, we are about to begin. Please take your seats in the audience until you are called. The judges will now be introduced to the audience." Jasmine followed the other contestants to the wings of the stage, where they could watch the proceedings. From there, she could see the massive audience filling the theater. 2,000 seats, and every single one was occupied. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit center stage. A man in a tuxedo walked out, microphone in hand. He was the host, a local celebrity Jasmine vaguely recognized from TV. "Welcome," he said, his voice warm and theatrical, "to the Chicago Grand Theater Talent Competition. Over the next several hours, you will witness 50 of the most talented young performers in the country, competing for a life-changing prize, $100,000, and a recording contract with Stellar Records." The audience applauded. Jasmine's heart hammered in her chest. But first, the host continued, "Let me introduce our esteemed panel of judges. These 3 individuals are legends in their respective fields, and their decision tonight will change one lucky contestant's life forever." A spotlight hit the judges' table at the front of the theater. "Our first judge," the host announced, "is Sarah Chen, renowned vocal coach and founder of the Chen Academy of Music. She has trained 3 Grammy winners and countless Broadway stars. Please welcome Sarah Chen." A woman in her 50s stood and waved. The audience applauded. She looked kind, Jasmine thought. She had a gentle smile. "Our second judge," the host continued, "is Thomas Reed Toney, award-winning director and choreographer. His productions have graced stages from New York to London. Welcome, Thomas Reed." A tall man with gray hair stood and bowed slightly. More applause. And finally, the host said, his voice dropping to a reverent tone, "Our head judge. He is a 2-time Grammy winner, a platinum-selling artist, and one of the most respected pianists and producers in the music industry. His work has influenced a generation of musicians. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Darius Cole. The audience erupted. People stood applauding wildly, and a man rose from the judges' table. He was tall black in his mid-40s. He wore an impeccably tailored suit. His presence commanded the room. There was something magnetic about him, something powerful. This was a man who had conquered the music industry, who had built an empire with his talent. Jasmine watched him from the wings. There was something about his face, something about the way he moved, something familiar. But that was impossible. She'd never seen this man before in her life. Darius Cole waved to the audience, his smile confident, his posture perfect. He sat back down, and the other judges followed suit. Now then, the host said, "Let the competition begin." Jasmine's stomach dropped. This was it. This was really happening. The first contestant was called, a soprano from New York. She sang an aria from an Italian opera. Her voice was technically perfect, hitting every note with precision. But there was something missing. Some spark. Some emotion. When she finished, the judges clapped politely and gave their feedback. Sarah Chen praised her technique. Thomas Reed suggested more emotional connection. Darius Cole said simply, "Beautiful voice. Learn to sing with your heart, not just your throat." The soprano scored well, but not spectacularly. She left the stage looking disappointed. The second contestant was a violinist from Boston. He played a complex classical piece with impressive skill. His fingers flew across the strings, never missing a note. The judges were more impressed. They gave him high marks for technical difficulty. But again, Darius Cole noted something missing. "You play like a machine," he said, not unkindly. "Music is about making people feel something. Right now I'm impressed, but I'm not moved." More contestants followed, a dancer, a magician, a guitarist. Each one talented in their own way. Each one desperate for that prize. Jasmine watched them all, her anxiety building with every performance. And then Blair Huntington was called. Blair walked onto that stage like she owned it. She sat at her expensive digital piano, adjusted her dress, and smiled at the judges. "I'll be performing an original composition," she said, her voice confident. "It's called Reflections." She began to play and sing simultaneously. The piece was good. Actually, it was more than good. It was polished and professional. Her voice was strong and clear. Her piano playing was technically flawless. She'd even incorporated a backing track that swelled at all the right moments. It was impressive. It was the kind of performance that screamed money training and preparation. When she finished, the audience gave her a standing ovation. The judges looked genuinely impressed. Sarah Chen smiled broadly. "That was extraordinary, Blair. Your control, your tone, the composition itself, all of it was top tier. I'm giving you a 9.5. Thomas Reed nodded. "Agreed. Professional quality. You could be on Broadway right now. 9.8 from me." Darius Cole studied Blair for a long moment. "You're very talented," he said finally, "and you've clearly had excellent training. But I'm curious, why did you write this piece? What were you trying to express?" Blair blinked, caught off guard. "Well, I wanted to showcase my range, to demonstrate my abilities." Darius nodded slowly. "I see. And you succeeded. But music isn't about showcasing abilities. It's about connection. It's about making the audience feel what you feel. Your technique is a 10, your heart." "I'm not sure I heard it." He paused. 9.2. Blair's smile tightened, but she maintained her composure. With an average score of 9.5, she was currently in first place. She left the stage looking satisfied, shooting Jasmine a smug glance as she passed. More contestants performed. Some were good. Some were mediocre. None matched Blair's score. The competition continued hour after hour, and Jasmine felt her nerves spiraling out of control. And then finally the host called her name. Next up, we have Jasmine Wright, 17 years old, from right here in Chicago. This was it. Jasmine picked up her old keyboard and walked onto that stage. The lights were blinding. The audience was a dark mass beyond the brightness. She could feel 2,000 pairs of eyes on her, judging, evaluating, dismissing. She walked to center stage and set up her keyboard on the provided stand. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely plug in the power cord. The host approached her with a microphone and a warm smile. "Jasmine, welcome. Tell us a little about yourself." Jasmine's mouth was dry. She tried to speak, but at first no sound came out. She cleared her throat and tried again. "My name is Jasmine Wright. I'm 17. I'm from the South Side. And what will you be playing for us tonight, Clair de Lune, by Claude Debussy?" The host's eyebrows rose slightly. "A classical piece. Ambitious. And where did you learn to play?" This was the moment. This was where she could make up some inspiring story, could sell herself the way Blair had. But Jasmine had never been good at lying. "I taught myself," she said quietly. "I found a keyboard in a dumpster when I was 7. I've been learning from free videos online ever since." A murmur rippled through the audience. The host looked genuinely touched. "That's incredible, Jasmine. And why are you here tonight? What does this competition mean to you?" Jasmine looked out at the darkness beyond the lights. Somewhere out there in a hospital across town, her mother was watching on a small TV screen, praying for a miracle. "I'm here to save my mother's life," Jasmine said, her voice stronger now. "She needs heart surgery. She needs it soon, and this prize money is the only way I can help her." The theater went silent. Even the judges leaned forward, suddenly more attentive. In the judges' panel, Darius Cole felt something twist in his chest. Save my mother's life. There was something about this girl, about the desperate determination in her voice, something that reminded him of someone. "Well," Jasmine, the host, said softly, "we're rooting for you. Good luck." He stepped back. The spotlight narrowed, focusing only on Jasmine and her keyboard. The theater held its breath. Jasmine sat down. She positioned her hands over the keys. And for a moment, she couldn't move. The weight of everything crashed over her. This was it. This was her one chance. If she failed, her mother would die. It was that simple. That terrible. She closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's smile. She thought of those nights practicing in their tiny apartment. She thought of that hazy memory from childhood, of large hands guiding her small fingers, of a deep voice saying, "Just feel the music, baby girl. Let it flow through you." And she began to play. The first notes of Clair de Lune floated through the Chicago Grand Theater like whispers in the dark. They were soft, hesitant, fragile. Jasmine's hands trembled on the keys, and you could hear it in the music. You could hear her fear. But then something shifted. Something changed. The fear began to melt away, replaced by something purer, something deeper. The music took over. It flowed through Jasmine's fingers like water, like breath, like a language she'd been born speaking. She forgot about the audience. She forgot about the judges. She forgot about everything except the melody unfolding beneath her hands. Clair de Lune is a piece about light and shadow, about beauty and melancholy intertwined. It's a piece that speaks to something fundamental in the human soul. And Jasmine didn't just play it, she lived it. Her fingers danced across the old keyboard, coaxing sounds from those worn keys that shouldn't have been possible. The broken keys didn't matter anymore. The crackle in the speaker faded away. All that existed was the music. In the audience, people began to cry. Not because the playing was technically perfect. There were small imperfections, moments where Jasmine's inexperience showed, but because it was real, because you could feel her desperation, her love, her hope pouring through every note. This wasn't a performance. This was a prayer. The melody built, swelling from gentle whispers to powerful waves of emotion. Jasmine's whole body moved with the music rocking slightly, her face a canvas of pure feeling. She was somewhere else now, lost in a world where music was the only language that mattered. But in the judges' panel, something extraordinary was happening. Darius Cole sat frozen in his chair, his pen fallen from his hand, his breath caught in his throat. Because those notes, that melody, the way she played it, he knew that touch. He knew that interpretation. It was impossible, but he knew it. His mind flashed back 14 years, to a cramped apartment on the south side of Chicago, to a tiny 3-year-old girl with bright eyes and curious hands, to lazy Sunday mornings when he would sit at his old keyboard playing Clair de Lune, while his wife Gloria cooked breakfast and their daughter climbed into his lap asking to help. He could hear his own voice, young and untroubled. "Here, baby girl, put your hands on mine. Feel the music. That's it. Now press here, gentle like you're petting a kitten. Good. You're a natural. You're going to be better than me someday." The little girl had laughed, her small fingers, struggling to reach the keys. "Play more, Daddy. Play more." And he had played. He'd played Clair de Lune 1,000 times in that apartment with his daughter's hands on his, teaching her the opening phrase over and over. It had been her favorite piece. She would fall asleep to it every night. That was before he'd gotten the call, before the opportunity to tour Europe with a famous producer, before he'd made the worst decision of his life and left them behind chasing a dream that had turned into a nightmare of guilt and regret. Darius shook his head slightly, trying to clear the memories. It couldn't be. It was just coincidence. Lots of people played Clair de Lune. It was one of the most famous piano pieces in the world. But then Jasmine hit a particular phrase, a particular combination of notes, and she played it exactly the way he had taught her all those years ago. Not the standard interpretation. His interpretation. The one he'd developed himself. The one he'd never recorded, never performed publicly. The one he'd only played in that apartment for his wife and daughter. And Darius felt his world tilt on its axis. He stared at the girl on stage, really looked at her for the first time. Her age, 17. The math was right. Her features, he couldn't see them clearly from this distance, but there was something familiar about the shape of her face, the way she held herself. Her name, Jasmine Wright. Wright had been Gloria's maiden name, the name she must have gone back to after he left. His hands began to shake. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. It couldn't be. But what if it was? What if that girl on stage pouring her soul into his favorite piece of music was his daughter? The daughter he'd abandoned. The daughter he'd thought about every single day for 14 years. Next to him, Sarah Chen noticed his distress. "Darius," she whispered. "Are you all right?" He couldn't answer. He couldn't speak. He could only listen as Jasmine moved into the climax of the piece, her fingers flying across the keys, the music building to its emotional peak. And then, gradually, softly, she brought it back down, letting the final notes fade into silence, like a whisper, like a goodbye, like the last light of day disappearing into night. The final note hung in the air for a long moment. And then the theater erupted. 2,000 people rose to their feet, applauding, shouting, crying. It was pandemonium. It was catharsis. They had witnessed something transcendent, something that went beyond mere technical skill. They had witnessed a soul laid bare. Jasmine sat at her keyboard, stunned tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe what had just happened. She couldn't process the sound of all those people, all that approval, all that love directed at her. The host rushed out, his own eyes wet. "Jasmine Wright, ladies and gentlemen." That was absolutely incredible. The applause continued. It went on, thunderous and unrelenting. At the judges' table, Sarah Chen was wiping her eyes. Thomas Reed sat back in his chair, shaking his head in amazement. And Darius Cole gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white, his whole body trembling. Finally, the applause died down enough for the judging to begin. Sarah Chen spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. "Jasmine," she said, "I have been teaching music for 30 years. I have heard countless performances. But what you just did," she paused, struggling for words. "That wasn't just playing. That was storytelling. That was truth. You took us somewhere. You made us feel things we didn't know we needed to feel. That keyboard of yours, that broken old keyboard in your hands, it sounded like a Steinway Grand. 10. I'm giving you a 10. The audience roared its approval. Thomas Reed nodded vigorously. "I agree with everything Sarah said. Jasmine, you have a gift. Not just technical skill, though, that's evident, but emotional intelligence. The ability to communicate feeling through your instrument. That's what separates good musicians from great ones. 10 from me as well." More applause. Jasmine could barely comprehend what was happening. 2 10s. She'd never imagined scoring that high. But the real moment came when Darius Cole finally found his voice. He cleared his throat. Once. Twice. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely controlled. "Jasmine," he said, and had to stop. He took a breath, steadied himself. "Where did you learn to play that piece?" It was an odd question. Not praise or critique, just a question. The audience murmured in confusion. Jasmine blinked, surprised. I taught myself. From videos. But that specific interpretation, that particular way of playing certain phrases. Where did you learn that?" Jasmine's brow furrowed. "I don't know. It felt right. It felt familiar somehow, like I'd heard it before a long time ago." Darius closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears streaming down his face. He didn't bother to hide them. "It felt familiar," he repeated quietly, "because I taught you those phrases. When you were 3 years old, when you used to sit on my lap and put your hands on mine, when I still had the right to call myself your father." The theater went dead silent. Jasmine stood frozen on stage, not understanding, not processing. What Darius stood up slowly from the judges' table. His voice carried through the theater, raw and broken. "My name is Darius Cole, but 14 years ago I was just Darius, and I was married to a woman named Gloria Wright, and we had a daughter, a beautiful, perfect daughter named Jasmine." The color drained from Jasmine's face. "I left," Darius continued, his voice cracking. "I left because I was scared, because I was weak, Because I thought I couldn't provide for you. And I've regretted it every single day since. Every single day. The audience was transfixed, witnessing something intensely private playing out on a public stage. The host, sensing the gravity of the moment, stepped forward. Perhaps we should take a break. No, Darius said firmly. No more running. No more hiding. He looked directly at Jasmine, his eyes pleading. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know that I've been searching for you for years. Your mother changed addresses, changed phone numbers. I hired investigators, but by the time they found you, I was too much of a coward to show up. How could I face you after what I'd done? Jasmine couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. And now here you are, Darius said, tears flowing freely, playing the piece I taught you. Fighting to save the woman I abandoned. You're 17 years old, and you're already more courageous than I ever was. You're extraordinary, Jasmine. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The silence in the theater was deafening. Jasmine's hands went to her mouth. She shook her head, slowly backing away from the microphone. No. No, you don't get to do this. Not here. Not now. She turned and ran off stage, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the stunned silence. Darius collapsed back into his chair, his head in his hands. The host looked between the empty stage and the devastated judge, clearly unsure how to proceed. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Sarah Chen placed a hand on Darius's shoulder. Did you know? She asked quietly. Before she performed, no, Darius whispered. I had no idea, but when she played, I knew immediately. Thomas Reed leaned forward. What do we do? We still have to finish the competition. We finish it, Darius said, forcing himself to sit up straight. We do our jobs. We judge fairly. He looked at his fellow judges. But I need to abstain from scoring her. I can't be objective. Not about this. Sarah shook her head. Darius, if you abstain, she can't win. The rules require unanimous scoring. Then change the rules, Darius said desperately. Please, don't punish her because of me. Don't let my mistakes destroy her chance to save Gloria. The host spoke into his headset, conferring with the producers. After a tense moment, he nodded. The producers have agreed to accept a score from just 2 judges in this extraordinary circumstance. Darius exhaled shakily. Thank you. The host turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief intermission while we sort out this unprecedented situation. Please remain in your seats. But nobody was going anywhere. The entire audience was buzzing with shock and sympathy and disbelief. What they'd just witnessed wasn't just a talent competition anymore. It was a human drama of the highest order. Backstage, Jasmine had locked herself in a bathroom stall, sobbing uncontrollably. 14 years. 14 years of wondering why she wasn't good enough for her father to stay. 14 years of watching her mother struggle alone. 14 years of pain and abandonment and unanswered questions. And now he showed up. Now he claimed he'd been searching for her. Now he wanted forgiveness. A soft knock on the bathroom door. Jasmine, honey, it's Ms. Anderson. Jasmine hadn't even realized her teacher was here. But of course she was. Ms. Anderson had supported her through everything. Go away, Jasmine choked out. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. Not yet. I can't go back out there. You have to. For your mother. The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Her mother. Gloria. Who was watching this whole thing on TV from her hospital bed. Who had just seen the man who abandoned her appear on national television. Jasmine slowly unlocked the stall door and emerged. Her makeup was ruined, her eyes red and swollen. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the girl staring back. "What do I do?" she whispered. Ms. Anderson handed her tissues. "You finish what you started. You let them score your performance, and then you deal with everything else after." "I don't know if I can. You're the strongest person I know, Jasmine Wright. You carried your mother through her darkest days. You taught yourself piano with nothing but determination and an old keyboard. You walked onto that stage and made 2,000 people cry. You can do this." Jasmine wiped her eyes, blew her nose, took several deep breaths. "Does my mother know he's here?" she asked. "Did someone tell her? I'm sure she knows by now." Jasmine pulled out her phone with shaking hands. 17 missed calls from the hospital. She dialed back. Gloria answered on the first ring. Baby, are you okay? Mama?" Jasmine's voice broke. "He's here. He's the judge. He said I know. I saw. Baby, I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have prepared you for this possibility. You knew he was a judge, no. But I knew he was famous. I knew he was out there somewhere. I should have warned you. What do I do, Mama? What do I do?" Gloria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You go back out there. You let them finish their judging. You win that prize money. And then later, when you're ready, you decide if you want to talk to him. But right now, we focus on the competition. On saving my life. Everything else can wait. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world. Now go show them what you're made of." Jasmine ended the call. She splashed cold water on her face, fixed her hair as best she could, and then with Ms. Anderson by her side, she walked back through the backstage area toward the wings. The intermission was ending. The host was preparing to resume. Jasmine took her position, ready to return to the stage when called. But in the judges' panel, Darius Cole sat hunched in his chair, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last 30 minutes. He'd just done what he swore he'd never do again. He'd hurt his daughter. And this time he'd done it in front of the entire world. The lights in the Chicago Grand Theater came back up. The audience settled back into their seats, still murmuring about what they'd witnessed. This was no longer just a talent competition. It had transformed into something far more profound, far more human. The host walked back onto the stage, his expression carefully neutral. "Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. What we've experienced tonight is certainly unprecedented, but we are going to continue with our competition in a professional manner." He glanced toward the wings where Jasmine stood, just visible in the shadows. "Jasmine Wright, could you please return to the stage?" Jasmine's legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to walk back out into that spotlight. The audience gave her a standing ovation before she'd even reached center stage. It wasn't about her playing anymore. It was about her strength, her resilience. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, refusing to look at the judge's table, refusing to look at him. The host placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Jasmine, are you able to continue?" She nodded. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Yes. Then let's complete the judging. As you heard, Mr. Cole has recused himself from scoring your performance due to personal conflict. Your final score will be determined by judges Chen and Reed." He turned to the panel. "Judges, your scores." Sarah Chen stood, and when she spoke, her voice carried through the theater with unmistakable authority. "Jasmine, what happened tonight doesn't change the fact that I just witnessed one of the most moving performances I've ever seen. Your score stands. 10. Thomas Reed nodded. "Agreed. Whatever personal matters need to be resolved, they don't diminish your extraordinary talent. 10. A perfect score from both judges. Mathematically, with Blair's 9.5 average, Jasmine had won. The host checked his cards, confirmed the scores. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to announce that the winner of the Chicago Grand Theater Talent Competition and the recipient of $100,000 plus a recording contract is Jasmine Wright. The theater exploded. People were screaming, crying, jumping to their feet. Confetti cannons went off. Balloons dropped from the ceiling. It should have been the happiest moment of Jasmine's life. Instead, she stood there numb as the host handed her an oversized check and a trophy. She looked out at the audience, at all those celebrating strangers, and felt completely alone. "How does it feel?" the host asked, holding the microphone to her. "My mother is going to live," Jasmine said quietly. "That's all that matters." She didn't wait for more questions. She walked off stage, still carrying the check and trophy, leaving the host to wrap up the show. Backstage was chaos. Production staff wanted interviews. Other contestants wanted to congratulate her. Blair Huntington stood in a corner looking shocked and furious, but Jasmine ignored all of it. She found Ms. Anderson, handed her the trophy, and said, "Can you take me to the hospital? I need to see my mother." "Of course. But Jasmine, there are people who need to talk to you about the prize money, about contracts. Later. Please. I just need to see my mother." Ms. Anderson nodded and began running interference, telling everyone that Jasmine would handle the business matters tomorrow. Right now, she needed space. But as they headed toward the back exit, a figure stepped into their path. Darius Cole stood there, no longer the confident judge from earlier. He looked broken, desperate. "Jasmine, please, just 5 minutes. That's all I ask." "You don't get to ask anything," Jasmine said coldly. "You lost that right 14 years ago." I know I did. But please, no." Jasmine tried to move past him, but he stepped into her path again. "Your mother," he said urgently. "Gloria, how is she?" "The heart surgery. Is she in danger right now?" Jasmine stopped. "Why do you care? Because I never stopped loving her." "Either of you. I was weak and stupid and selfish, but I never stopped loving you." "Love?" Jasmine's voice rose, all the emotion she'd been holding back, finally breaking free. "You don't know what love is. Love doesn't abandon people. Love doesn't leave a pregnant woman to struggle alone. Love doesn't leave a little girl wondering what she did wrong for her entire childhood." People were staring now. Production staff. Other contestants, everyone within earshot, had stopped to watch this confrontation. "You're right," Darius said, tears streaming down his face again. "You're absolutely right. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. But your mother, Gloria, she never deserved what I did. She was perfect. She was everything. And I threw it away because I was terrified of being a poor father struggling to make ends meet. So I became a rich father who wasn't there at all." He laughed bitterly. "What an improvement." Jasmine's hands were shaking. "Where were you when she was working 2 jobs? When she was so exhausted she could barely stand? When I found her collapsed on the kitchen floor because her heart was giving out from years of stress?" "I don't know. I was playing sold-out concerts. I was accepting awards. I was living in mansions and driving expensive cars. I was living the dream while you and Gloria were living my nightmare." Darius's voice broke completely. "I was a coward. I am a coward. And I've been punishing myself every day for 14 years, but that doesn't help you. That doesn't change anything." Ms. Anderson gently touched Jasmine's arm. "We should go." But Jasmine stood frozen, staring at this man who was supposed to be her father. She could see the genuine anguish in his eyes, the real remorse. But she also felt 14 years of abandonment. 14 years of watching her mother struggle alone. 14 years of wondering if she'd been worth staying for. I used to imagine Jasmine said quietly what I would say to you if I ever saw you again. I had whole speeches planned about how much I hated you, about how you ruined our lives, about how I hoped you were miserable. She paused. But now that you're standing here, I don't have the energy for speeches. I'm just tired. I'm so tired of carrying this around. Then let me carry it, Darius pleaded. Let me carry the burden of what I did. You shouldn't have to. It doesn't work like that. You don't get to just take it back, I know. But I can try to make amends. However long it takes. Whatever it takes. Jasmine shook her head. I don't want your money. I don't need your connections. I won that prize myself. My mother is going to get her surgery and we're going to be fine. Without you. Just like we have been for 14 years. She stepped around him, and this time he let her pass. But as she reached the door, she stopped. Without turning around, she said, The surgery is in 2 weeks, at University Hospital. If you want to prove you're not still a coward, you know where to find us. Then she was gone. Darius stood in that hallway, surrounded by strangers, and did something he hadn't done in 14 years. He let himself completely break down. He sank to the floor, his back against the wall, and sobbed like a child. Because he'd found his daughter, and she was magnificent, and he'd already lost her again. Sarah Chen approached carefully. She sat down next to him on the floor, not speaking, just being present. After a long while, she said softly, You really didn't know it was her? No. Not until she played. Then I knew immediately. He wiped his face roughly. She plays exactly like I taught her, but better. So much better. She's remarkable. She's everything I gave up. Everything I thought I was too weak to deserve. Darius looked at his hands. The hands that had won Grammys and made millions. These hands built a career, but they couldn't hold on to the people I loved. It's not too late, Darius. Isn't it? You saw her face. She hates me. She doesn't hate you. If she hated you, she wouldn't have told you about the surgery. She wouldn't have given you a chance. Sarah stood and offered her hand. Come on, get up. You have 2 weeks to figure out how to be a father again. Darius took her hand and pulled himself up. I don't know how. Then learn. You learned to play piano. You learned to produce music. You can learn this too. Across town in a hospital room, Gloria Wright held her daughter as Jasmine cried. She stroked her hair and whispered comfort, and didn't say I told you so, even though she'd known this day might come. Did I do the right thing? Jasmine asked through her tears. Telling him about the surgery. Only you can answer that, baby. I don't know why I said it. I was so angry. I am so angry. But then I saw his face and she trailed off. He looked broken. Gloria finished softly. Yes. Gloria was quiet for a long moment. I've had 14 years to think about what I'd say to Darius if I saw him again. And I've gone through every emotion. Rage, hurt, bitterness. But lately mostly sadness, because the man I loved wouldn't have left us. The man I loved was kind and gentle and so full of music. That man wouldn't have abandoned his daughter. She tilted Jasmine's face up to look at her. So what happened to him? What broke him so badly that he could walk away? Does it matter? Maybe. Maybe not. But if he shows up in 2 weeks, if he's really there, maybe you'll get your answer. Jasmine sat up, wiping her eyes. I don't know if I can forgive him, Mama. Nobody's asking you to? Not yet. Maybe not ever. But you told him where we'd be. So some part of you, however small, isn't ready to close that door completely. The oversized check lay on the hospital bed between them. $100,000. A fortune. A lifeline. Proof that Jasmine had succeeded, that she'd saved her mother, that she didn't need anyone's help. But looking at it, Jasmine felt empty. She'd won everything she'd fought for. So why did she feel like she'd lost something too? Over the next 2 weeks, life moved at a dizzying pace. The talent competition footage went viral. Jasmine's performance, combined with the dramatic revelation of her father's identity, captured the nation's attention. The video was shared millions of times. News outlets wanted interviews. Social media exploded with opinions. Some people called Darius a monster. Others felt sympathy for a man who'd made a terrible mistake and lived with the consequences. Everyone had an opinion about whether Jasmine should forgive him. But Jasmine ignored all of it. She had more important things to focus on. She deposited the prize money and immediately scheduled her mother's surgery with the best cardiac surgeons in Chicago. She met with lawyers to review the recording contract, making sure it was fair and didn't trap her in obligations she couldn't fulfill. She fielded calls from music schools offering scholarships, from producers wanting to work with her, from agents wanting to represent her. It was overwhelming, but Ms. Anderson helped her navigate it all, protecting her from predators while helping her seize legitimate opportunities. By the end of the first week, Jasmine had accepted a full scholarship to Berklee College of Music, starting in the fall. She'd signed a modified recording contract that gave her creative control. She'd even done one carefully controlled interview where she politely declined to discuss her father. And through all of it, she never heard from Darius Cole. No calls, no texts, no flowers or cards. Part of her was relieved, but a smaller part, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, felt disappointed. "Maybe he's giving you space," Ms. Anderson suggested when Jasmine mentioned it. "Or maybe he's still a coward after all," Jasmine replied. But she didn't really believe that. Because when she watched the interview footage back when she saw how completely he'd broken down, she'd seen something real, something beyond words or excuses. She'd seen genuine remorse. The day before Gloria's surgery, Jasmine sat with her mother in the hospital room, trying not to show her terror. The surgery was complex. There were risks. Gloria could die on that table. "Stop thinking like that," Gloria said, reading her expression perfectly. "I'm going to be fine." "You don't know that. I know the surgeon is excellent. I know we have the money for the best possible care. I know my daughter is the strongest person I've ever met, and she'll be okay no matter what happens." Gloria took Jasmine's hand. "But I also know that I'm not ready to go anywhere. I want to see you graduate. I want to see you play Carnegie Hall. I want to be an annoying mother-in-law someday when you find someone worthy of you. So I'm going to fight like hell to stay alive." Jasmine hugged her mother carefully, mindful of the IVs and monitors. "I love you so much, Mama. I love you too, baby. Forever and always." That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. She lay in the fold-out chair next to her mother's bed, listening to the beep of monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the sounds of a hospital at night. Tomorrow, everything would change, one way or another. She pulled out her phone, and before she could stop herself, searched for Darius Cole. His latest social media post was from 3 days ago, a picture of sheet music with the caption, "Working on something new, dedicated to the ones I lost." The comments section was a war zone. Some people calling him out, others defending him. But Jasmine noticed he hadn't responded to any of them. He'd just posted and gone silent. She closed the app and put her phone away. It didn't matter. Tomorrow was about her mother, about survival, about the future they were fighting for. Darius Cole and his guilt and his regrets would have to wait. But as she finally drifted off to sleep in the uncomfortable chair, her last thought was a question she couldn't quite silence. Would he come? The morning of Gloria's surgery dawned gray and cold. Jasmine woke up in that hospital chair with a stiff neck and a sense of dread so heavy it felt like drowning. The nurses came in at 6 a.m. to prep Gloria for surgery. They checked vitals, administered pre-op medications, marked the surgical site, reviewed consent forms. Gloria was eerily calm. She held Jasmine's hand and made jokes with the nurses. She talked about the things they'd do after she recovered. She acted like this was routine, like there was no possibility of anything going wrong. But Jasmine saw the fear in her mother's eyes. She saw the way Gloria's hand trembled slightly when she signed the final consent form. She saw the moment just before they came to wheel her away, when Gloria's composure almost cracked. "I'm scared," baby Gloria whispered. "Me too, Mama." They held each other for a long moment. "If something happens," Gloria started. "Nothing is going to happen. But if it does, I need you to know something." Gloria pulled back to look at her daughter. "I need you to know that every struggle, every hardship, every impossible day, it was worth it. Because I got to be your mother. You are my greatest accomplishment, my greatest joy, and I am so proud of you." Jasmine was crying now. "Don't talk like that, please. I love you, Jasmine Gloria Wright. More than music, more than life itself. I love you too." The surgical team arrived then. They were efficient and professional, transferring Gloria to a gurney, double-checking everything. The lead surgeon, Dr. Patricia Hayes, stopped to speak with Jasmine. "The surgery will take approximately 4 to 6 hours. We'll replace the damaged valve repair, some additional issues we found on the latest scans, and close. Your mother is in excellent hands. But there are risks." Dr. Hayes didn't patronize her with false reassurances. "There are always risks with cardiac surgery, but your mother is relatively young and otherwise healthy. Her odds are good." "Relatively good isn't certain." "No, it's not. But it's the best we can do." They wheeled Gloria away then. Jasmine stood in the doorway watching her mother disappear down the hallway toward the operating rooms and felt like her heart was being torn from her chest. Ms. Anderson arrived a few minutes later, bringing coffee and breakfast that Jasmine couldn't eat. They sat in the surgical waiting room surrounded by other families in various states of anxiety, all of them waiting for news about their loved ones. The hours crawled by. 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Jasmine couldn't focus on anything. She tried reading. She tried listening to music. Nothing worked. All she could do was stare at the doors that led to the surgical wing, waiting for someone to emerge with news. At 11:30, a figure appeared in the waiting room doorway. Jasmine glanced up automatically, then did a double-take. Darius Cole stood there, looking uncertain and out of place. He wasn't dressed in his usual expensive suits. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He held a bouquet of flowers, Gloria's favorite lilies, though how he remembered that after 14 years, Jasmine didn't know. Their eyes met across the waiting room. For a moment, neither moved. Then Darius slowly approached. Other people in the waiting room recognized him murmuring to each other, but he ignored them. His attention was entirely on Jasmine. "I didn't think you'd come," Jasmine said. "I told you I would. You've said a lot of things over the years." Darius flinched, but accepted the barb. "How is she, Gloria?" "In surgery. Has been for 5 hours. No news yet." He sat down, not right next to her, but close enough to talk quietly. "Can I wait with you?" Jasmine wanted to say no. She wanted to tell him to leave, that he'd given up the right to be here, to care, to be part of this. But the truth was, she was terrified. And having someone else here, even if it was him, made the waiting slightly more bearable. "Fine," she said shortly. "But I don't want to talk." "Okay." They sat in silence for a long time. Ms. Anderson had tactfully moved to another set of chairs, giving them space. The TV in the corner played some daytime talk show nobody was watching. Other families came and went, receiving news both good and bad, celebrating or grieving. An hour passed, then another. Darius didn't try to make conversation. He just sat there, his presence steady, his hands clasped between his knees. Finally, at 1:15, Dr. Hayes emerged through the surgical doors. She looked tired but satisfied. Jasmine leapt to her feet. "She's out of surgery," Dr. Hayes said immediately. "The procedure went very well. We replaced the valve, repaired some minor damage to the surrounding tissue, and her heart is responding beautifully." Jasmine's knees nearly gave out. "She's okay. She's really okay. She's in recovery now. She'll be unconscious for another hour or so as the anesthesia wears off. But yes, she's okay. The surgery was a complete success." Jasmine burst into tears. All the fear, all the tension, all the impossible weight she'd been carrying for months came pouring out. Ms. Anderson rushed over and hugged her, both of them crying together. Darius stood back, his own eyes wet, watching his daughter celebrate the fact that the woman he'd abandoned was going to live. He felt relief so overwhelming it was almost painful. Gloria was alive. She was going to be okay. "Can I see her?" Jasmine asked when she could speak again. "Soon. We'll come get you when she's awake and stable. In the meantime, try to rest. You look exhausted." Dr. Hayes left, and Jasmine sank back into her chair, emotionally wrung out. She put her head in her hands and just breathed. Her mother was alive. The surgery had worked. Everything was going to be okay. Thank God, she heard Darius whisper. Thank God. She looked over at him. He was crying too, not bothering to hide it. "Why are you here?" Jasmine asked. Not accusatory this time, genuinely curious. Darius wiped his face. "Because I love her. Because I never stopped loving her. Because I've been a coward and a fool, but I couldn't stay away today. I needed to know she was safe. You left her. I did. You broke her heart. I know. She worked herself nearly to death because you weren't there. I know. I know all of it, Jasmine. I've lived with it every day." He turned to look at her directly. "I was 28 years old when you were born. I was broke. I was struggling. I played dive bars for $50 a night. Gloria was working part-time while pregnant because we needed the money. And I was terrified. Absolutely terrified that I would fail you both. That I'd become like my father, bitter and angry and unable to provide. So you left instead." "So I left instead," he agreed quietly. "I got offered that tour, and I saw it as an escape. A chance to make real money, to become successful, to become someone who could provide. I told myself I'd come back. I'd make it big and come back and be the father and husband you deserved." He laughed bitterly. "But success is addictive, and guilt is paralyzing. The more successful I became, the more ashamed I was of leaving. How could I come back? What could I say? Sorry I abandoned you, but look, I have a Grammy now. You could have just come back, I know. But I was a coward. I am a coward. I convinced myself you were better off without me. That Gloria had probably moved on, found someone better. That you didn't even remember me." "I didn't," Jasmine admitted. "Not really, just fragments. The piano lessons. The piano lessons. Claire de Lune. I played that for you every night when you were a baby. You'd fall asleep to it." His voice cracked. "When you played it at the competition, when you played it exactly the way I taught you, I felt like I'd been hit by lightning, because it meant you'd remembered. On some level, you'd remembered me." Jasmine didn't know what to say to that. It was true. She had remembered, even if she hadn't known it was a memory. "I hired investigators 5 years ago," Darius continued. "They found you. They found Gloria. They told me you were struggling but surviving. They sent me photos." He pulled out his phone and showed her. Pictures of Jasmine at 13, 14, 15, walking to school, working at the grocery store, playing her keyboard in their apartment window. I've been watching from a distance. I know that makes me sound like a creep. Maybe I am, but I couldn't stay away completely, and I couldn't show up and disrupt your lives with my guilt. Jasmine looked at the photos. You've been watching us for 5 years and never said anything. What would I have said? Hi, I'm the father who abandoned you. Mind if I intrude on your life now that you're doing fine without me? We weren't doing fine. I know that now. But I told myself you were. I told myself a lot of convenient lies. Silence fell between them again. But it was a different kind of silence. Less hostile, more contemplative. I don't forgive you, Jasmine said eventually. I don't know if I ever will. I don't expect you to. But I'm glad you came today. I'm glad I didn't have to wait alone. She paused. Well, Ms. Anderson was here, but you know what I mean. I do. My mother still loves you, Jasmine said quietly. She never said it out loud, but I could tell. She never dated anyone, never even looked at anyone. She spent 14 years alone because you broke her heart so badly she couldn't imagine trusting anyone else. Darius closed his eyes in pain. I don't deserve her forgiveness either. No, you don't. But maybe, Jasmine trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe people deserve second chances, even people who don't deserve them. Darius looked at her sharply. Are you saying I'm not saying anything definite? I'm saying that my mother is alive. I'm saying that you showed up today. I'm saying that I've spent 14 years being angry and I'm tired. I'm so tired of being angry. Jasmine, don't! She held up a hand. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't tell me everything is going to be magically fixed. Don't act like showing up today makes up for 14 years. It doesn't. I know. But it's a start. Maybe. Possibly. I don't know yet. They sat with that for a while. Finally, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Jasmine Wright. Your mother is awake and asking for you. Jasmine stood immediately. Then she turned to Darius. Do you want to see her? He looked shocked. Are you sure no? But I'm asking anyway. Won't she be upset? Probably. But that's between you and her, not me. Darius stood slowly. Okay, if you're sure. I'm not. But let's do it anyway. They followed the nurse through a maze of hallways to the cardiac recovery wing. Gloria's room was small and filled with monitors, but she was awake, propped up on pillows, looking pale but alert. Her eyes went straight to Jasmine. Baby, you're here. Of course I'm here, Mama. Where else would I be? Jasmine rushed to her mother's side and carefully hugged her. How do you feel? Like someone cracked open my chest and replaced my heart, so pretty much as advertised. Gloria smiled weakly. Then her eyes shifted to the doorway where Darius stood frozen, and her smile disappeared. What is he doing here? I came to see if you were okay. Darius said, his voice barely above a whisper. Now you care if I'm okay? 14 years later, now you care. Gloria. Don't. Her voice was sharp, despite her weakness. Don't you dare stand there and act like you have any right to be in this room. You're right. I don't. But I needed to know you were safe. Why? So you can go back to your Grammy Awards and sold-out concerts and feel better about yourself? No. Because I never stopped loving you. Gloria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love. You don't know what that word means, Darius. I do. I learned it from you. And then I threw it away like an idiot, and I've regretted it every single day since. Good. You should regret it. Jasmine stood between them, uncertain whether she'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe this isn't the right time. No. Gloria said, her eyes never leaving Darius. Let him say whatever he came here to say. Let him get it off his chest so he can leave again. Darius stepped further into the room. I came to say I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I need you to hear it anyway. I'm sorry for leaving. I'm sorry for being weak. I'm sorry for every night you worked double shifts, every bill you couldn't pay, every moment you struggled alone. I'm sorry for breaking your heart and our daughter's childhood. I'm sorry for all of it. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. Why did you leave, Darius? That's what I could never understand. We were happy. We had problems, sure, but we were happy. What changed, I got scared. I looked at our bank account, and I looked at our baby, and I felt like I was drowning. I felt like no matter what I did, I'd never be enough. Never provide enough, never be good enough. And when that tour offer came, it felt like a lifeline, like a chance to become someone who could take care of you properly. I didn't need you to be rich. I needed you to be there. I know that now. But I was stupid and young and convinced myself that leaving was the noble choice, that I'd come back successful and make everything better. He shook his head. Instead, I became successful and miserable. I built an empire on the foundation of abandoning the only people I ever truly loved. Gloria was crying openly now. You broke me, Darius. You broke me so completely I thought I'd never heal. I know. I'm so sorry. I waited for you. For months I waited. I told myself you'd come back. You'd realize you'd made a mistake and come back. But you never did. I couldn't face you. I was too ashamed. So you let us struggle for 14 years because you were ashamed. Do you have any idea how selfish that is? Yes, I do. And I have no defense, no excuse. I was wrong. About everything. Jasmine watched her parents, these two people who had once loved each other enough to create her, now separated by 14 years of pain and mistakes. Part of her wanted to make them keep talking, force them to work through everything. But another part of her knew this wasn't her story to control. Mama, she said softly, do you want me to make him leave? Gloria looked at her daughter for a long moment. Then she looked back at Darius. Do you have any idea what it was like? Explaining to a 3-year-old that Daddy wasn't coming home, watching her look for you every time someone knocked on the door, seeing her teach herself piano because she remembered you teaching her, and it was the only connection she had left. No. But I've imagined it. I've tortured myself imagining it. Good. You should be tortured. But Gloria's voice had lost some of its anger. Now there was just exhaustion. I loved you so much, Darius. I would have followed you anywhere. If you'd asked me to come on that tour, I would have found a way. We could have made it work. I know. But I was too much of a coward to ask. I thought I was protecting you by leaving. I thought I was being noble. He moved closer to the bed. I was an idiot, a complete and total idiot, and I've paid for it every day. But my payment doesn't matter, because you and Jasmine are the ones who suffered. You're the ones who paid the real price for my cowardice. Gloria closed her eyes. She looked so tired, so drained. The surgery had taken everything out of her, and this conversation was taking what little strength she had left. I think we need to stop, Jasmine said firmly. My mother needs to rest. Of course. I'm sorry. Darius backed toward the door. I'll go. Wait. Gloria's voice stopped him. Darius. He turned back. Thank you for coming. For being here when she needed someone. It's the least I could do. It's more than you've done in 14 years. He nodded, accepting the blow. Gloria, is there any chance? Do you think someday you might be able to forgive me? Gloria was quiet for a long time. I don't know. Ask me again when I'm not recovering from heart surgery." It wasn't absolution, but it wasn't absolute rejection either. Darius took what he could get. "Okay, I will." He left then, and Jasmine watched him go, feeling strange and uncertain about everything. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked her mother. "Letting him come?" Gloria reached for her hand. "I don't know, baby, but at least now we know he's genuinely sorry. That's something." "Do you still love him?" Part of me never stopped, even when I hated him, even when I swore I'd never forgive him. But love isn't enough, Jasmine. Love couldn't make him stay 14 years ago, and I don't know if love can bring him back now. Jasmine nodded. She understood. Forgiveness wasn't simple. Redemption wasn't guaranteed. Some wounds left scars no matter how much time passed. But as she sat there holding her mother's hand, as the monitors beeped steadily, and Gloria drifted off to sleep, Jasmine thought about the way Darius had looked at them. The genuine anguish in his eyes, the way he'd shown up even knowing he wasn't wanted just to make sure Gloria was safe. Maybe people could change. Maybe second chances were possible. Maybe. But those were questions for another day. Right now, all that mattered was that her mother was alive, the surgery was successful, and they had a future together. Everything else could wait. Over the next week, Gloria recovered in the hospital, while Jasmine camped out in her room, refusing to leave for more than a few hours at a time. The surgery had been successful, but the recovery was slow and painful. Gloria had good days and bad days. Days when she seemed almost normal, joking with nurses and eating full meals. And days when the pain was so intense she could barely speak, when every breath was agony. Jasmine was there through all of it. She helped her mother walk the hallways, pushing the IV pole alongside her. She read to her when Gloria couldn't sleep. She advocated for her with doctors when the pain medication wasn't strong enough. She was fierce and devoted and exhausted. Darius sent flowers every day. Different arrangements, always beautiful, always Gloria's favorites. He never included a card, never tried to call or visit again. Just flowers. A silent acknowledgement of his presence, his concern, his continued existence on the periphery of their lives. Gloria never said anything about the flowers. She didn't throw them away, but she didn't display them prominently either. The nurses would arrange them on the windowsill, and Gloria would glance at them occasionally, her expression unreadable. On the 4th day after surgery, when Gloria was starting to feel more like herself, she finally addressed the elephant in the room. "We need to talk about your father," she said. Jasmine looked up from her phone where she'd been reviewing scholarship details from Berkeley. "Do we?" "Yes. Because he's not going away. Those flowers aren't going to stop. And you need to decide what you want to do about it. What I want, Mama, this is about you too. He hurt you. He did. But you're the one who told him about the surgery. You're the one who let him come to the hospital. So part of you, however small, wants a relationship with him." Jasmine set down her phone. "I don't know what I want." "That's okay. You don't have to know yet. Do you want me to have a relationship with him?" Gloria was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I want you to be happy. If having a relationship with your father would make you happy, then yes, I want that. If it would make you miserable, then no, I don't want that. But it's your choice to make, not mine. But he hurt you. He did. And I've spent 14 years being angry about it. But anger is exhausting, baby. And life is short. I almost died 2 weeks ago. I'm lying in a hospital bed recovering from heart surgery, and all I can think about is how much time I've wasted being bitter." She reached for Jasmine's hand. "I'm not saying I forgive him. I'm not even saying I want to see him again. But I'm saying that maybe holding on to hatred isn't worth it anymore. So what are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to talk to him, to get to know him, to let him be part of your life, I won't stand in your way. and I won't hold it against you. He's your father. You deserve to know him, flaws and all." Jasmine felt tears prickling her eyes. "I don't know if I can forgive him." "Then don't, not yet, maybe not ever. But at least give yourself the option. Don't close the door completely because you think that's what I need. Make your choice based on what you need." That night after Gloria had fallen asleep, Jasmine sat in the darkened hospital room and thought about her father. About the man who had taught her to play piano when she was 3. The man who had abandoned them. The man who had built a career but lost a family. The man who had shown up at the hospital even knowing he wasn't wanted. She pulled out her phone, and before she could overthink it, searched for his number. It was publicly available through his management company. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed a text message. "This is Jasmine. Thank you for the flowers. And for being at the hospital. I'm not ready to talk yet, but maybe someday. I don't know." She hit send before she could delete it. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a response. "Thank you for texting. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. Whenever you're ready. Or if you're never ready, I'll understand that too. I'm just grateful to know you're both okay. Darius." It wasn't much. Just a few words exchanged across an impossible distance. But it was something. A crack in the door that had been slammed shut 14 years ago. Over the next few days, they exchanged occasional texts. Nothing deep or emotional. Just small updates. Jasmine would tell him about Gloria's recovery progress. Darius would share something mundane about his day. They were circling each other carefully, testing boundaries, trying to figure out if any kind of relationship was possible. Gloria was discharged from the hospital after 8 days. She would need months of cardiac rehabilitation, but the prognosis was excellent. With proper care and rest, she would make a full recovery. Jasmine brought her mother home to their small apartment, which suddenly felt different, brighter somehow, filled with possibility instead of desperation. The oversized check from the competition was framed on the wall, now a reminder of what Jasmine had accomplished. A reminder that they were going to be okay. Ms. Anderson had organized a small welcome home gathering. Nothing big, just a few close friends and neighbors who had supported them over the years. There were balloons and a cake and genuine happiness. For the first time in months, Jasmine allowed herself to relax, to breathe, to feel hopeful about the future. That night, after everyone had left, and Gloria was settled in bed, Jasmine sat at her old keyboard. She hadn't played since the competition, hadn't wanted to. Music had been wrapped up with so much stress and pressure that it had stopped being a joy. But tonight, alone in the quiet apartment with her mother safely asleep down the hall, Jasmine placed her fingers on the keys, and she began to play. Not Claire de Lune this time. Something else. Something improvised and new. A melody that came from somewhere deep inside, something she didn't know she had in her. It started sad, melancholic, filled with all the pain and struggle of the past years. But gradually, it shifted. The melody became hopeful. Not happy exactly, but resilient, determined. Survival music. Phoenix rising from ashes music. She played for 20 minutes, lost in the music, and when she finally stopped, she felt lighter. Music was hers again. Not a tool to save her mother or win competitions. Just hers. Pure and simple. Her phone buzzed. A text from Darius. "I don't know if this is weird, but I'm playing piano right now too. 1:00 a.m. and I can't sleep, so I'm in the studio working through some old compositions. Funny how music is always there when nothing else makes sense." Jasmine smiled, despite herself. She typed back, "Not weird. I'm playing too. Just finished improvising something new. That's how the best pieces start. From improvisation, from feeling rather than thinking. Is that how you write, usually?" The technical stuff comes later, but the heart of a piece always comes from just letting my fingers wander and seeing what happens. They texted back and forth for an hour, talking about music. Just music. Not the past, not the abandonment, not the complicated mess between them. Just the one thing they both understood completely. It was the longest conversation they'd had in 14 years. When Jasmine finally put her phone down and crawled into bed, she felt something unfamiliar. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. Maybe the first tiny seed of possibility that someday, somehow they might figure out how to be father and daughter again. The next morning, Gloria found Jasmine at the kitchen table looking at college paperwork for Berkeley. She'd been accepted on full scholarship, all expenses paid. She'd start in the fall, just 4 months away. "You excited?" Gloria asked, pouring herself decaf coffee. "Terrified," Jasmine admitted. "I've never been anywhere but Chicago, never lived anywhere but this apartment. You're ready. More than ready. I'm worried about leaving you alone. Baby, I'm going to be fine. I have excellent doctors, a strong support system, and a new lease on life. Literally." She sat down across from Jasmine. "You need to go live your life. Follow your dreams. Become the musician you're meant to be. What if something happens while I'm gone? Then I'll call you, and you'll come home. But nothing is going to happen. My heart is fixed. I'm getting stronger every day, and I'll be right here when you come home for holidays." Jasmine nodded, trying to believe it. "Besides," Gloria added casually, "if you're really worried, I'm sure your father would keep an eye on me. He's been pretty persistent with those flowers." Jasmine looked up sharply. "You want him around? I didn't say that. I said if you're worried, that's an option." Gloria sipped her coffee. "Have you talked to him much? A little. Mostly about music. And how does that feel?" "Weird. Complicated, but not terrible." Gloria nodded. "That's probably the most you can hope for right now. Weird and complicated, but not terrible. Are you mad that I'm texting him? No, baby. I told you this is your decision. I meant it. But you loved him. He broke your heart. He did. But he also gave me you. And watching you fight for me these past months, seeing your strength and talent and determination, I can't regret anything that led to you existing, even the painful parts." Jasmine came around the table and hugged her mother carefully. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, more than anything in this world." That afternoon, Jasmine made a decision. She texted Darius, "Would you want to meet for coffee? Just to talk. No promises about anything. Just coffee." His response came immediately. "Yes, absolutely. Whenever works for you. I'll come to your neighborhood. You pick the place." They agreed on the next day at a small cafe 3 blocks from Jasmine's apartment. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. Jasmine spent that evening in a state of anxious anticipation. What would they talk about? What if it was awkward? What if she broke down crying or got angry or couldn't handle being in the same room with him? Gloria, sensing her daughter's nerves, sat her down. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready, I know. But I think I am, maybe. I don't know. Then go find out. And if it's too much, you can leave. You're not obligated to stay. You're not obligated to forgive him. You're not obligated to do anything except what feels right to you. What if nothing feels right? Then you leave. And you try again later, or you don't. But at least you'll know." The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. She ordered tea she didn't drink and sat at a table by the window watching the street. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her hands were shaking again, just like they had backstage at the competition. At exactly 11 a.m., she saw him. Darius walked down the sidewalk looking nervous himself. He was dressed simply again, no expensive suit or designer sunglasses. Just a regular man trying to blend in, trying not to draw attention. He spotted her through the window. Their eyes met. He raised a hand in a small wave. Jasmine waved back. And then Darius Cole, two-time Grammy winner and internationally famous musician, opened the door to a small cafe on the south side of Chicago and walked toward his daughter, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to become the father he should have been all along. Darius sat down across from Jasmine, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. Up close, she could see how much older he looked than in his professional photos. There were lines around his eyes, gray, threading through his hair. The weight of 14 years of guilt had aged him. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. "I'm not sure why I'm here," Jasmine admitted. "I don't know what I want from this." "That's fair. I appreciate you giving me any chance at all." An awkward silence fell. They both stared at their drinks, neither knowing how to bridge 14 years of absence in a single conversation. Finally, Jasmine spoke. "Tell me about when I was little, before you left. What was I like?" Darius's expression softened. "You were incredible, so curious about everything. You asked a million questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do songs come from? How does the refrigerator stay cold?" He smiled at the memory. "You drove your mother crazy with all the questions. Did I really like music? You loved it. From the time you were a baby, I'd play piano, and you'd stop crying immediately. You'd just stare at my hands, completely mesmerized. When you got older, maybe 2, you'd climb up onto the bench with me and bang on the keys. You had no coordination yet, but you were so determined. When did you start teaching me? Around 3. You were finally big enough to reach the keys properly. I'd put you on my lap and guide your hands. You picked it up so fast it scared me a little. Natural talent like that is rare." He paused. "You got that from me. It's probably the only good thing I ever gave you." "That's not true." "What else? A lifetime of abandonment issues, a mother who had to struggle alone, a love of music, a natural gift, a face that I see in the mirror every day and looks like yours." Jasmine took a breath. "I spent 14 years hating you, but I couldn't hate the piano. I couldn't hate music. So in a weird way, you were always there. Every time I played, you were there." Darius's eyes filled with tears. "That's the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. It's not kind, it's just true." They sat with that for a moment. "Why did you really leave?" Jasmine asked. "I want the real reason, not the explanation you gave my mother. The actual truth." Darius took a long time to answer. "I was terrified of becoming my father." "Your father?" "He was a musician too, jazz drummer. Talented, but inconsistent. He'd get gigs, make good money, then spend it all on drinking and gambling. My mother worked herself to death trying to keep us afloat. She died when I was 16, heart attack from stress." He looked at his hands. "I grew up poor and scared and hungry, and I swore I'd never do that to my own family. I'd never be that kind of father. So you became no father at all instead?" "Yes. I saw us struggling when you were born. The bills piling up, the overdue rent notices, Gloria having to work while pregnant. And I felt like I was failing you. Like history was repeating itself and I was becoming my father." He shook his head. "So when that tour opportunity came, I saw it as my escape, my chance to break the cycle. I told myself I'd make money, become successful, then come back and be the provider you deserved. But you never came back. By the time I was successful enough to come back, I was too ashamed. How could I show my face? I'd made my choice. I'd chosen my career over my family. And every day that passed made it harder to return. The guilt became this massive weight I couldn't escape. So I just kept going. Kept working. Kept achieving. Thinking maybe if I was successful enough, important enough, it would somehow justify what I'd done. Did it know? Every award I won felt hollow. Every sold-out concert felt meaningless. I'd stand on stage in front of thousands of people, and all I could think about was the 2 people I'd left behind. Jasmine processed this. You could have called. You could have sent money at least. I tried. Early on. I sent checks to your old address. They came back marked return to sender. Your mother had moved, changed her number. I hired investigators eventually, but by the time they found you, years had passed. What was I supposed to do? Show up and disrupt your lives? Force myself back into the picture? Yes, Jasmine said simply. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. You were supposed to show up and beg forgiveness and try to make amends. Instead, you watched from a distance and felt sorry for yourself. Darius flinched, but didn't argue. You're right. I know I'm right. Jasmine leaned forward. You want to know what the worst part was? It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the struggling. It was not knowing why. Growing up thinking that somehow, someway I wasn't good enough, that I'd done something wrong, that if I'd been a better daughter, you would have stayed. God, Jasmine. I know now that it wasn't about me, that it was your fear and your weakness. But I didn't know that as a kid. I just knew my father left and never came back. Darius was crying openly now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could go back and change everything, but you can't. That's the thing. You can't undo it. You can't give me back those 14 years. You can't give my mother back her 20s and 30s when she should have been living her life instead of just surviving. I know. Believe me, I know. They sat in silence for a long time. Other cafe patrons gave them curious looks, but mostly left them alone. Finally, Jasmine spoke again. I'm going to Berkeley in the fall. I know. I saw the news. Congratulations. That's an incredible school. Full scholarship. You earned it. I did. I earned it by myself without your money or your connections or your help. I'm proud of you. Don't. Jasmine's voice was sharp. You don't get to be proud. You don't get to claim any credit for who I became. I became this person despite you, not because of you. Darius nodded, accepting the blow. You're right. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. I'm tired of apologies. Then what do you want from me? I don't know. Jasmine's voice rose, drawing looks. She lowered it. I don't know what I want. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I don't know if I even want to try. Then why did you text me? Why did you agree to meet Jasmine? Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small. Because part of me still wants a father. Part of me, no matter how angry I am, still remembers being 3 years old and sitting on your lap learning piano. Part of me still misses you, even though I know I shouldn't. Darius reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. I want to be your father. I want that more than anything. But I don't know how anymore. I don't know what that looks like after 14 years. Neither do I. Then maybe we figure it out together slowly. One coffee at a time. No pressure. No expectations. Just trying. Jasmine looked at his outstretched hand. It would be so easy to take it, to accept this offering of reconciliation. But it would also mean letting go of some of her anger, some of her justified resentment. It would mean being vulnerable again. I need ground rules, she said. Okay, anything. First, you don't get to buy your way back into my life. No expensive gifts, no money unless I specifically ask for it, which I won't. Agreed. Second, you respect my boundaries. If I need space, you give it to me. You don't push. You don't demand more than I'm willing to give. Absolutely. Third, you apologize to my mother. Really apologize. Not just words, but action. You make amends to her first before we can have any real relationship. I will. I'll do whatever it takes. And fourth, Jasmine took a breath. You have to mean it. This can't be a publicity stunt or an ego thing or a way to assuage your guilt. If you're going to be in my life, you have to actually be in it. No half measures. No giving up when it gets hard. Because it will get hard. I'm going to be angry sometimes. I'm going to say hurtful things. I'm going to make you prove yourself over and over. And you have to be willing to do that. I am. I swear to you I am. Jasmine studied him for a long time, looking for signs of deception, of insincerity. But all she saw was a broken man desperate for a second chance. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took his hand. "Okay," she said. "We can try. But Darius, if you hurt me again, if you disappear again, there won't be a third chance. This is it. You understand? I understand. I won't disappear. I promise you." They sat like that, hands clasped across a cafe table. Two people separated by years of pain, but connected by blood and music and a fragile thread of hope. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't even close to healed, but it was a beginning. They talked for 2 more hours that day. Darius told her about his career, his travels, his struggles with addiction and depression that had followed his success. Jasmine told him about school, about her friends, about her dreams for the future. They talked about music, about their favorite pianists, about compositions they loved. And slowly, gradually, the awkwardness began to fade. Not disappear, it would take years for that, but fade enough that conversation became easier. When they finally left the cafe, Darius walked Jasmine back toward her apartment building. They stopped a block away. "Thank you for today," he said. "Really, you didn't have to do this." "I know. Can we do it again next week?" maybe Jasmine considered. "Yeah, we can do it again." "And Jasmine, about your mother. When would be a good time to try to talk to her? I'll ask her. She'll let you know when she's ready. If she's ever ready." Fair enough. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, neither sure how to say goodbye. A hug seemed too intimate. A handshake too formal. Finally, Jasmine just nodded. "I'll text you." "Okay. Take care of yourself." "You too." She walked away, and Darius stood on that sidewalk watching his daughter disappear around the corner, feeling something he hadn't felt in 14 years, hope. 6 months later, the small recital hall at Berklee College of Music was packed with students, faculty, and invited guests. It was the end-of-semester showcase where first-year students performed their original compositions for the first time publicly. Jasmine Wright stood backstage wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. She was nervous, but not terrified. Not like at the talent competition. This was different. This was for love of music, not desperation. This was art for art's sake. Ms. Anderson was there, of course. She'd driven up from Chicago to watch. And Gloria was there too, seated in the front row, healthy and strong, her new heart beating steadily in her chest. She'd made a full recovery over the past months, returning to work part-time, regaining her strength, living the life she'd fought so hard for. And in the back row, trying to be inconspicuous and failing because people kept recognizing him, sat Darius Cole. He and Jasmine had met for coffee every week since that first meeting. Sometimes they talked about music, sometimes about the past. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, slowly learning how to be around each other again. He'd apologized to Gloria too, a month after that first coffee with Jasmine. It had been painful and difficult. Gloria had cried. Darius had cried. They'd said things that needed to be said, ugly truths and hard acknowledgments. Gloria hadn't forgiven him, not completely, but she'd softened enough to allow him back into their lives on a limited basis. Now they were all here, this fractured family watching Jasmine perform. The announcer called her name. Jasmine walked onto that stage, sat at the grand piano, a real one, this time not her broken keyboard, and faced the audience. "I wrote this piece over the last 3 months," she said into the microphone. "It's called Redemption. It's about broken things finding their way back to wholeness, about second chances, about hope." She placed her hands on the keys, and she began to play. The composition was remarkable. It started with dissonance, with broken chords and fractured melodies. You could hear the pain in it, the struggle. But gradually, carefully, the discordant notes began to resolve. Harmony emerged from chaos. Beauty grew from brokenness. It was technically impressive, showcasing everything Jasmine had learned in her first semester. But more than that, it was emotional. It was real. It was the story of her life translated into music. In the front row, Gloria wept quietly, clutching Ms. Anderson's hand. In the back row, Darius sat perfectly still, barely breathing, listening to his daughter's composition with absolute focus. He could hear himself in her playing. The techniques he'd taught her all those years ago, but he could also hear something entirely her own. A voice that was unique, powerful, unmistakable. She was better than he'd ever been. She would go further than he'd ever dreamed, not because of him, but because of her own incredible talent and determination. The piece built to a climax, powerful and cathartic before resolving into something peaceful, something that felt like acceptance, like healing, like home. The final note hung in the air and then faded to silence. For a moment, the audience sat stunned. Then they erupted in applause. Jasmine stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. When she looked out at the audience, she found her mother first. Gloria was on her feet, clapping and crying and beaming with pride. And then Jasmine found her father. Darius was standing too, clapping with everyone else. But he wasn't smiling. He was crying, tears streaming down his face, looking at his daughter with an expression of pure awe and love. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and for the first time in 14 years, Jasmine smiled at her father. A real smile. Small, but genuine. Darius smiled back. And in that moment, something shifted. The weight between them, though still present, felt lighter, more bearable. After the showcase, they all went to dinner together. It was still awkward sometimes, still complicated. Gloria and Darius were cordial, but not close. Jasmine was still working through her feelings, still processing years of abandonment. But they were together. They were trying. And that was something. Over dessert, Darius cleared his throat. "I have something for you," he said to Jasmine. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Jasmine opened it suspiciously. Inside was a single piece of paper. She read it, then looked up in shock. "This is the deed to a recording studio. A small one, in Chicago. I bought it last month." Darius spoke quickly, nervous. "Before you say anything, I'm not trying to buy you. I know we agreed no gifts, but this isn't for you." "Well, it is and it isn't. I don't understand. I'm going to run it as a non-profit. Free recording time for young musicians who can't afford studio access. Kids from neighborhoods like where you grew up. Kids who have talent but no resources." He paused. "I'm calling it the Gloria Wright Memorial Music Studio." Gloria gasped. "Darius. Not memorial." "As in, you're dead?" he said quickly. "Memorial as in honoring you. For everything you survived, everything you overcame." He looked at her directly for the first time all evening. "You kept our daughter alive and taught her to be strong and gave her every opportunity you could, despite my absence. This is the least I can do to honor that." Gloria's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. I can't change the past, Gloria, but I can try to build a better future. For kids like Jasmine used to be, kids who need a chance." Jasmine stared at the deed. "You're really doing this, I am. And I was hoping, maybe when you're home from school you could teach there sometimes, share what you know with the next generation. You want me to teach, I think you'd be incredible at it. You understand what it's like to struggle, to teach yourself, to fight for every opportunity. Those kids need someone who gets it." Jasmine looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at the deed in her hands. A recording studio. A place where kids like her kids with talent but no resources could have a chance. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." They finished dinner, and when they left the restaurant, there was a moment of uncertainty about how to say goodbye. Gloria surprised everyone by stepping forward and hugging Darius. Brief, but genuine. "Thank you," she whispered, "for the studio, and for trying. Thank you for letting me try." She stepped back, and then it was Jasmine's turn. She stood in front of her father, this man she was slowly learning to know again, and made a decision. She stepped forward and hugged him. Darius froze for a second, shocked. Then his arms came around her carefully, like she was made of glass, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "Thank you for coming tonight," Jasmine said softly. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything." His voice was thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Jasmine. So incredibly proud." And this time she didn't correct him. This time, she let him be proud. Because he'd earned the right just a little bit by showing up, by trying, by being there. They separated, and Jasmine wiped her eyes. "I'll call you next week, I'd like that." She walked away with her mother and Ms. Anderson, 3 strong women who had survived everything life threw at them and come out stronger. And Darius stood on the sidewalk in Boston watching them go, feeling lighter than he had in 14 years. He pulled out his phone and did something he hadn't done since he left Chicago all those years ago. He opened his music app and searched for Claire de Lune, but not a recording of someone else playing it. A recording of himself from before he was famous from a demo tape he'd made in their tiny apartment. He pressed play and listened to his younger self playing that beautiful melancholic piece. And in the background, barely audible, he could hear it, the sound of a 3-year-old Jasmine laughing and asking to play too. He closed his eyes and let the memory wash over him. All the pain, all the regret, all the years of guilt. But also for the first time, a glimmer of hope. A possibility of redemption. Some broken things could be mended. Some distances could be crossed. And sometimes the music we made was sweeter for all the pain we'd endured. Darius Cole had lost 14 years with his daughter. But he had the rest of his life to try to make amends. And that, he thought, was a gift he didn't deserve, but would fight every day to be worthy of. He started walking, hands in his pockets, heading back to his hotel. And for the first time in 14 years, he was whistling. Playing music not out of obligation or career or guilt, but simply because he felt like it. Simply because he was at long last beginning to heal.